Scorpio Woman, the Depth Seeker, Episode 2, A Fire That Couldn't Stay. Chapter 1, The Room with a Pulse. The bass line arrived before she did, a low thrum traveling up from the cellar venue into the alley like a heartbeat calling her by name. She followed it down chipped stairs, past posters of bands that never quite made it, into a room lit copper and honey. The singer on stage was all rasp and ache. The crowd leaned forward as if appetite had weight. She found a spot by a pillar and let the sound move through her. Then she felt a gaze like warm sun on a closed eyelid. He stood near the bar, tall enough that the light found his cheekbones and crowned them. Confidence radiated from him the way heat rises off a summer street, not forced, not negotiable. He lifted his glass as if toasting the moment and crossed to her with unhurried purpose. "You're listening with your whole spine," he said, a smile bright as a match. "I like that." "Leo?" she asked, amused by the way his presence announced itself. He tilted his head. "Guilty, and you're the weather after a storm, clear air, everything sharper." She laughed. "Scorpio." His grin widened, delighted by confirmation rather than conquest. "Of course." They stood shoulder to shoulder while the band built a small cathedral out of sound. He smelled like citrus and cedar, all bright top notes with a steady, warm bass. When the singer hit a vowel that sounded like forgiveness, the Leo man leaned in, voice low. "This is the part where I tell you I'll forget the song unless I can talk to you about it after." "Brave," she said, "or theatrical?" He shrugged in a way that made both feel like the same skill. "I'm good on stage and off." After the set, they found a corner table with a candle that softened their edges. Conversation flowed without detour, no nervous joking, no deflection. He asked questions as if answers were gifts he'd earned by showing up, eyes steady, palms open. She noticed her instinct to test people for depth didn't wake up defensive around him. His warmth was its own gravity. He admired her mystery without trying to pry it open like a lock. She admired his brightness without needing to dim it to see. When his hand finally reached for hers, it wasn't a grab, it was a cupped flame offered in trust. Heat traveled from skin to skin, an uncomplicated yes. The first kiss arrived unannounced and inevitable, flame to tinder. It wasn't frantic, it was thorough, attentive, the kiss of someone who knows pleasure is an art and looks directly at the person they're kissing. She tasted promise and smoke. The walk to her place felt like the world had moved out of their way. He narrated the city with affection, this deli for late peaches, that stoop for meteor showers, and she thought, he has built a life he actually lives in. At her door he paused, a courtly pause that made choice explicit. "I'm here to be here," he said, "not to perform arrival." Her mouth curved. "Then come in." Inside, the quiet throbbed with the echo of music. He traced the line of her jaw with the back of his fingers, reverent, and she felt herself answer without words, her pulse stepping toward his, her breath sinking to a warmer tempo. Clothing unfastened like a story loosening. When bodies met, it was with focus and fire, hands that learned and remembered, kisses that asked and listened. They moved together as if they had rehearsed in a dream, heat folding into tenderness and back again, a rhythm that made time porous. After they lay with a window cracked, city air cooling damp temples, he tucked a curl behind her ear and said, "You feel like a secret I don't want to keep from myself." She smiled into the dark. "You feel like light that knows where to land." Between them the candle flickered down, pooling gold. When it went out, the room didn't dim, it glowed from within. Chapter 2, Two Suns, One Sky. They were immediate and unapologetic. Breakfast became a stage for laughter and a lab for hunger. Toast abandoned mid-bite when a glance turned to a kiss, coffee cooling while hands warmed other maps. He had a way of entering a room as if bringing summer with him. She had a way of making that summer rain at the right moment so nothing burned. They adored each other out loud. He said he loved the way her attention could hold a universe still. She said she loved the way his joy didn't apologize for taking up space. In the studio where he kept his records and a battered guitar, he showed her a wall of Polaroids, friends mid-laugh, a grandmother holding court, a dog wearing a birthday crown. "I collect proof that days were worth it," he said. She ran her finger over a photo of him on stage, sweat shining, eyes lit from inside. "You glow when you're witnessed," she murmured. "You glow when you witness," he answered, and meant it. They created rituals that tasted like ownership without chains. Tuesday night vinyl, Sunday morning markets, a shared note on their phones called "Great Lines We Heard in Public." In bed they were worship and wildfire, mouths that found the places language couldn't, hands that spoke fluently, bodies that learned when to slow until the world sharpened and when to accelerate until it blurred. He was generous with praise, a lover who said thank you between breaths. She was generous with trust, a lover who let silence make the next request. Control showed up as a compliment at first. He liked choosing restaurants, she liked choosing routes. He liked lifting the heavy boxes without being asked, she liked paying close attention to the things he didn't say. When they danced living room, no shoes, he led with a hand warm at her back. She followed until the song turned and then led back, a tide taking over the shore. Their laughter when they collided was easy. Their apologies were genuine and not required often. But heat needs air and boundaries to be livable. One night he surprised her with a party to celebrate her new project, draft balloons, people she loved, people he loved, a cake that tasted like childhood. She laughed, fed him frosting with her thumb, felt cherished. Later, when she wanted to slip out for quiet, he coaxed her back for one more toast. They came for you, he said, arm around her waist. And I came for you, she said. Let me have 10 minutes alone and I'll come back brighter. He hesitated, then yielded, mostly. When she returned, he kissed her like she'd won something. Another day in her apartment, she arranged a desk the way her focus demanded. Lamp here, notebooks there, a talisman stone at the upper right. He reached to move the lamp for better light, and she stopped his hand. I placed it, she said, not unkind. He drew back, hands up, playful surrender. The lamp stayed. The moment did too. The first argument arrived with a knock. They didn't answer quickly enough. It wasn't about jealousy. It was about tempo. He thrived where life was full and seen. She required depth, which often means being quiet enough to hear it. When a friend canceled dinner and he suggested filling the slot with a show and drinks and more people, she said, "What if we let the night be bare?" He smiled, coaxing. Or what if we clothe it in gold? The teasing turned when neither yielded. Why does stillness feel like absence to you? She asked. Why does motion feel like abandonment to you? He countered, voice warm but firm. They made up the way they did everything, with intention and heat. She straddled his lap on the couch, foreheads touching, breath mingling. He anchored her hips and let the apology move through their bodies as sensation and promise. Slower than desire wanted, slower until wanting turned articulate, they found the edge where patience becomes a spark and then crossed it together. After, sweaty and laughing, they agreed to take turns choosing pace. It sounded simple, it was not. Chapter 3, Warmth with a Roar. Autumn sharpened. He started a run of shows that gathered their friends like constellations. She dove into revisions that demanded her whole heart. They cheered for each other with unembarrassed pride, he in the front row at her reading, chin lifted, clapping like thunder, she at the lip of the stage, head tipped back, singing along until her voice was raw. "We're ridiculous," he said after one show, forehead against hers. "We're inevitable," she replied, and meant it. Jealousy didn't tempt them, admiration did. He adored the way rooms turned toward her when she finally spoke, a low current of attention shifting to meet her. She adored the way he welcomed people without pretense, turning strangers into guests and guests into friends. But admiration has a shadow called demand. He wanted her mystery to open on command. She wanted his warmth to locate its off switch without needing instruction. Control again, this time inside intimacy. He liked lighting, she liked meeting him and then steering when feeling required it. On a rain-slicked night they came in soaked and laughing, clothes clinging like second skin. He backed her to the wall with a kiss that tasted like weather, hands framing her face as if he'd waited all day to return to this exact map. She pulled him closer, slid fingers under his shirt, and then just as heat surged, she slowed everything deliberately. "Wait," she breathed. "Let's ruin time." He groaned in mock agony and real delight, surrendered to her tempo as she traced the path from his throat to his sternum with her mouth, unhurried as a vow. He shook under patience, eyes dark with yes. When he took the lead, it was worshipful. He would hold her gaze and say, "Tell me when to stop," and she would answer, "I will." He learned the angle of her breath when praise became too much and she needed quiet. She learned the pressure of his palm that meant don't run from pleasure right as it becomes a mirror. They were good together, very. The bed knew their names and said them back. The fights were operatic by contrast, scored by two sovereigns who refused to abdicate. At a dinner, a friend asked a careless question about her past. She answered with grace. He added a story for color she hadn't given him permission to share. Her smile thinned, the table felt the temperature change. On the sidewalk after, she said, "My story is not a centerpiece." He said he'd been proud of her resilience, wanted the room to see her power. "Then let them see it when I choose to show it," she said. He apologized sincerely and still went on to host an after-party. She declined. He said, "Come for me." She said, "Stay for me." They stood in the doorway of the bar like a painting of stalemate. That night they argued until their throats were hoarse and then fell into each other's arms as if argument were foreplay for a different language. Passion, then peace, peace, then sparks again when the smoke hadn't cleared. They were learning they shared an appetite but not a diet. Both loved flame. She required a hearth. He preferred a bonfire. In the morning he made omelets with the showmanship of a magician and kissed her shoulder while the pan hissed. "We keep trying to win," he said quietly. "I don't want to win against you." She pressed her lips to his wrist. "I want to win with you," she said, "but sometimes I need the field to go quiet." He lifted his eyes, lion bright and complicated. "I can be quiet," he promised. He could for a while. Chapter 4, Crown and Compass. They took a weekend away when city noise made every sentence sound like a dare. The inn had a fireplace and a window that framed trees already thinking about losing leaves. They promised each other three things: choose curiosity instead of certainty, ask before correcting, and kiss more than they argued. The ratio worked until it didn't. In the daylight, they were a portrait of ease. He drove with one hand and sang badly on purpose. She read him lines from a book that made them both laugh in the same key. They stopped at a roadside stand and sampled pears, sun-warm and dripping. Juice ran down their wrists, and he licked sweetness from her pulse like a blessing. In the room, afternoon stretched like a cat. They undressed each other without haste, the kind of tenderness that says, I know exactly where you shiver, and I will go there slowly. The fireplace watched, the bed learned new names. At night, wine loosened edges, and truth came in not unwelcome. He said he felt sometimes like a lighthouse expected also to be the sea. She said she felt sometimes like the sea asked to be a mirror. He wanted her to post more, to share the way she glowed in private. She wanted him to guard parts of himself from the crowd, to experience intimacy that existed for its own sake. My crown is not a costume jewelry, he said, half joking, half creed. Your crown is beautiful, she replied, a hand at his heart, but I need your compass more. Control again, now threaded with tenderness. He booked a couple's massage without asking. She canceled their horseback ride because the sky looked like it needed listening. He laughed and rebooked. She smiled and rescheduled. When it was time to choose a trail, they compromised, his ridge for the view, her river path for the quiet. On the riverbank, he kissed her against an old cedar, breath fogging the cooling air, and the world narrowed to mouths and fingers, and a small, ecstatic undoing that felt like being forged rather than spent. Back at the inn, they tried to talk about marriage, not as a plan, but as a philosophy. He thought of it as a stage you step onto together, lights up, audience of two plus the occasional cheering chorus. She thought of it as a sanctuary, no pews, no priest, just the practiced work of returning. He said, I want to be chosen publicly. She said, I want to be chosen privately and again and again. Both were true, neither canceled the other, but desire for how love is witnessed can be a kind of theology. Their liturgies conflicted. The fight that followed was almost gentle until it was. He accused her of hoarding herself. She accused him of mistaking visibility for value. He paced, hands in his hair. She sat very still, fury a cold star. I won't audition for safety, she said. I won't disappear to make your quiet holy, he replied. They stopped before they said things they couldn't unsay. In the silence, the fire popped, reminding them that flame behaves when contained. They made up, of course they did, with kisses that apologized and hands that remembered, with a slowness that turned to a rush and back to stillness, a liturgy they both believed in even when their doctrines diverged. The next morning, he made her laugh until she forgave the world. On the drive home, they held hands around the gear shift like teenagers who understood engines and still preferred pulse. Chapter 5: The Stage and the Depth. Back in the city, the pace returned to its relentless drum. He added a second residency. She accepted a panel invite on grief and narrative. He bought a jacket the color of applause. She bought a plant that looked like it had survived something. They kept their rituals and kept adding new ones to repair what ritual couldn't. At his show, a reviewer hovered. The Leo man turned the room to honey, the band tight, his voice a bright road. When he spotted her near the speakers, he lit and lifted one hand over his heart, a wordless your presence is oxygen. After the reviewer asked for a quote, he glanced at her and said, love makes you fearless on stage and more honest off. The line ran the next day with a photo of his grin. She felt proud and a little used. Was that our line? She asked gently. He kissed her forehead. It's true, he said. Truth is not always permission. At her panel, she spoke with precision about losses that do not disappear just because we refuse to look at them. He sat in the front row, not interrupting, not taming her depth, just witnessing. After a stranger wept in her arms, the Leo man waited until the last hug ended, then offered her water and a ride home in silence. She loved him fiercely in that moment. It was a quieter inferno than the stage, and it burned better. Control slunk back in when bills and calendars collided. He booked a last-minute after-party at their place without asking, certain she'd love the spontaneity. She arrived to a living room full of people who hugged her as if she'd planned it with him. She smiled, hosted, made it beautiful despite the bruise on her boundary. Later, when the last guest left, she said, my home is not your set. He bristled, ran his hand down his face. I thought it would delight you. You thought it would delight you, she corrected softly. The air crackled. They argued until words wore down, his about generosity and life lived out loud, hers about sanctuary and consent. The fight was an old one wearing new clothes. They slept back to back, heat still moving between them like a faithful animal that did not know how to leave. In the morning, he pulled her against him and said, let me fix it. She said, let it be unfixed so we can see it. They tried, he asked more, she shared more. He turned down events to cook with her. She posted a photograph of their interlaced hands without panic, but some differences are tectonic. One evening, he invited her on stage for a duet. No warning. The crowd roared. He reached for her hand, shining. She shook her head once, small but final. He covered the moment with a joke and a segue. Later, she explained, I cannot be pulled into the light like a prop. He said, I wanted to honor you. She said, honor asks first. He looked gutted, hurt lion, mane bristled. You embarrassed me. You endangered me, she said. The quiet after cracked like ice. They didn't touch that night. Desire waited, patient and stubborn. In the morning they reached for each other anyway, and the reconnection was exquisite and raw, a wordless admission. We are extraordinary here and still not okay. After she cried, not from pain, but from the ache of being almost right. Chapter 6, Love War. Their friends started joking that the two of them were their own weather system. Sun by noon, thunder by dusk, heat lightning at midnight. The joke was affectionate, the pattern was exhausting. They tried therapy. The counselor said, you both want to steer. What happens if you steer by domain? He led on logistics, she led on interior design. He planned parties with her consent forms signed. She planned holidays with his need for spectacle respected. It helped until it didn't. One evening he cooked enough food for 7 and invited 3. She added 2 and moved the table to accommodate the loud woman who tells the best ghost stories. The dinner was a triumph of warmth and wit. After he wanted to go dancing, she wanted to take a long bath with her head on his chest, and the world kept out. Just an hour, he coaxed. Just us, she asked. They stared across a choice they kept remaking. He went out, she bathed alone. Neither slept well. The next day, remorse and repair. Flowers he chose because they smelled like late summer. A letter she wrote that tasted like clear water. They met in the middle with a kiss that asked forgiveness and offered it both. They made love as if they were inventing it, all discovery and praise, the kind of closeness that leaves the body humming like a struck bell. He murmured against her throat, you are my favorite stage and my sanctuary, and she almost believed the two could be one. But the next fight arrived with sirens. A tabloid blog ran photos of him laughing with a woman outside the venue. The angle made intimacy out of light. He shrugged, unbothered, until he saw her face. I know it's nothing, she said evenly. I need you to know what it looks like to me. He got defensive, then contrite. Come to every show, he offered, a solution that sounded like a leash. That's not it, she said. I want you to choose what keeps us, not what keeps eyes on us. He rubbed his jaw, exhausted. Sometimes the eyes are how I breathe, she closed hers. Sometimes they are how I drown. They tried to laugh the storm away at first, danced in the kitchen until sweat made their foreheads slick, let rhythm override ruminations. They kissed against the fridge, against the counter, against the doorway to the bedroom where the air always got serious. Clothes went where they went, the floor kept their secrets. They knew how to translate fury into worship. They were experts. After, while breath still returned in waves, he said, marry me someday. It wasn't a proposal, it was a future he wanted named out loud. She kissed his palm. If someday looks like both a crown and a compass, she said. He smiled, lion-soft, and pulled her close. It should have soothed everything. It soothed only the skin, not the bones. Chapter 7, The Last Performance. They broke the same way they loved, brightly and in public, then privately and for real. At his final residency night, he invited half the city. She stood near the soundboard, proud, tired, tender. He poured himself into the mic, voice like struck metal, bending toward her on every chorus as if the songs had always been addressed to her, and now he was admitting it. The crowd felt a story and cheered for a happy ending that wasn't theirs to write. After the set, he wrapped her in a hug that gathered weeks and promises and sweat. Come to the after-party, he urged, eyes shining with adrenaline. She searched his face. Come home, she countered, gentle. He looked toward the door where people waited with cameras and compliments. An hour, he bargained. A lifetime, she thought, and shook her head. I need quiet. He went, she went home. The split was that simple and that devastating. In the kitchen, she poured water and listened to the clock. At 2 a.m., keys in the lock. He came in with apologies, with laughter tamped down to contrition, with the desperate need to turn toward her and make the night whole. She took his face in her hands and saw in his eyes everything she loved, the warmth that could feed a room, the courage to look straight at desire, the child who needed witness like air. They made love softly, without theater, as if the world were sleeping and they were the only ones awake. It was exquisite and final, a benediction disguised as a beginning. He moved like someone memorizing, she like someone blessing. They whispered names not as possession but as gratitude. When it ended, they lay there watching the ceiling until dawn bent the room into a new color. I can't keep trying to be your piece while being your stage, she said at last, voice almost a thread. He closed his eyes. I thought we could be both. We can be both people, she said, but I can't be both roles. His jaw worked, he swallowed. I don't know how not to blaze. She touched the corner of his mouth. I don't know how not to dive. He sat up, hands on his knees, shoulders broader with loss. I could try harder, she nodded. You already did. So did you, he said. They smiled at each other like people looking across a river neither built and both respect. He kissed her one last time, slow, mouths learning the shape of goodbye like a language. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. "You are a home I can't live in," he whispered. "You are a fire I can't sleep by," she answered. The line hurt and helped. Chapter 8: A Fire That Couldn't Stay. Morning arrived frank and golden, indifferent to their heroics. She made coffee. He folded a blanket. There is intimacy and logistics of endings. They did those well, too. He took his jacket from the chair, paused with his hand on the back as if asking the room permission to keep existing without him in it. She nodded. He nodded back. At the door he said, "I will love you in the present tense for a long time." She said, "I will love you in the past tense with gratitude." A smile ghosted his mouth. "Of course you will," he said, lying to the last. She grinned despite the ache. "Of course I will, Scorpio to the last." When he was gone, silence filled in like water returning to a riverbed. She sat on the floor and let tears come without scolding them for showing up late. The orchid on the sill, his species, not his gift, lit up the window with stubborn bloom. She laughed through salt. Outside, sirens and pigeons and a bus sighing. Inside, a vow trying on its new shape. She wrote, "You wanted love as a spotlight, I wanted love as a sanctuary. Neither is wrong, both can burn. Fire warms and devours, depth steadies and drowns. With you I learned to step into the light without panic and to refuse invitations that cost me my compass. With me you learned to let heat slow into embers that glow long after applause. We taught each other ways to live better for someone else." Later she walked to the river and stood where they had once argued about pace. The water moved like compromise, fast on top, slow below. She placed her hand on the rail and felt metal cool and certain. "I need peace," she said out loud to herself, to the day, to whatever listens where no one can see. Saying it didn't make her smaller, it made her whole. On the way home she passed the venue where they met, a new poster stapled over the old. She touched the paper with 2 fingers, a benediction both for what was and for what wouldn't be again. In the reflection of the glass she saw her own face, a little tired, more luminous. Loss had polished her without making her brittle. She texted him once, "Thank you for the warmth." He replied, "Thank you for the depth." That was the last message, a gentle period, not an ellipsis. She archived the thread because keeping it felt like honoring the parts of herself that had said yes. Then she opened a new document and titled it Sanctuaries, and the first line came easily: "Fire is not always home." She brewed tea, cracked the window, and let October breathe with her. Somewhere he would be on a stage, blazing. Somewhere she would be at a page, diving. The world is large enough for both, and her life was, too, now that she'd made the space. She lit a candle not for morning, but for the light that stays when the performance ends, and the room glowed from within. Like this video, subscribe, more stories like this are coming.